What is up, Watch fam? Happy Wednesday and welcome to this week's collection review. I am Christian from Theo and Harris, and today we're going to be diving into what might be the perfect watch collection. All right, before we jump into today's episode, we'll do a quick wristwatch check. I am wearing a beautiful Rolex reference 1601. What's so cool about it is it's actually an early example of a 1601. It dates to 1961, and it's got these beautiful, rare, indicative of being early in the production, history, Dauphine hands. I really impressive. I deal in this stuff literally every day. I buy and hunt for Rolexes, particularly Datejust, every day. So when I say that something is hard to find, I'm being serious. And this was hard to find, so I'm very glad that I have, though. So let's get into today's episode. We're reviewing a collection of a gentleman named Ben. A few quick things about Ben. Ben is a watch geek. Ben is from the Netherlands, I believe. Ben is nice. Ben emails in very long form, and Ben is going to laugh when he hears me say that because it is so true. In his most recent email to me, he prefaced the whole thing with, pour yourself a strong one, because this is going to be a long one, or something like that. Crack up, because he does write a lot. But what I love about Ben's watch collecting is the amount of thought that he puts into things. I think that it's very, very impressive. What I encourage more than any particular trend or any particular value proposition, I believe in Tudor. I believe in Rolex. These are things that I'm very much so into. I love Cartier more than almost anything, design-wise in the world. But more so than all of that, I want people to think about what they want. I want people to understand the watches that they enjoy and what that says about them, and really get into the hobby. So Ben does that very much so. So he's got a 2-watch collection, I believe, or if not, maybe he has a couple stragglers in there. But there are 2 watches that are the centerpieces of his collection. The first is a Rolex Sea-Dweller, reference 116600, and the second is a Cartier white gold Ceinture. It couldn't be more radically different watches. You have one watch that is probably most at home on the outside of a wetsuit while wrestling a marlin, or whatever it is that you do with marlins, and you have another watch that is most at home beneath the sleeve of a tuxedo. These are not just watches that represent these 2 lifestyles. This is not a tool watch and a dress watch. This is probably the epitome of tool watch and the epitome of dress watch. These are radically different. The fact that Ben has both of these is absolutely shocking. I don't think that in most scenarios, and it's not just me guessing, I mean, I've met a lot of watch geeks and talked to them about their collections, that someone who owns a Sea-Dweller would own a fine white gold automatic, Cartier. It just doesn't seem like it's in the same collection, but it is. And in knowing Ben, I now understand why. Okay, so let's dive into the watches themselves here for a second, and then we'll step back and get, meta and analytical. So, number 1, the Rolex Sea-Dweller. I'll start with this. I actually never handled the Sea-Dweller until about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And when I did, I was blown away. Although definitely thicker and heftier, it has a surprisingly smaller and more manageable presence than Submariners, particularly the C-Subs with those, Hulk cases or whatever you might want to call them. And that feeling is obvious when you put it on, but I didn't realize until Ben in his email pointed out the actual differences. I mean, if you look at the watches side by side, as he did a demonstration here, the difference between these 2 watches is quite noticeable. You have markedly slimmer lugs and crown guards on the Sea-Dweller, and this is a watch that you would assume to be the exact opposite. So believe it or not, when Ben was faced with the opportunity to pick up a sub or pick up the Sea-Dweller, he went with the Sea-Dweller because, to my disbelief, it actually does wear better, or rather wear smaller. And although Ben's wrist certainly isn't small, I think that it's definitely at a size in which a larger watch has the potential to overtake a wrist and to make it very imposing and almost like too try-hardy. So I think that Ben's decision to opt for the road less traveled and to go with the Sea-Dweller is super commendable, because it's not only a watch that doesn't get enough attention, and being obscure in the Rolex line is always a good thing, but it's a watch that factually made more sense for him. And I think that what really drove the decision home for me, or what drove the decision home for Ben and my decision to approve of his decision, was his thought process about the Sea-Dweller in many ways being the modern milsub. For those of you who don't know, the Rolex Military Submariner reference 5513, 5517, and then double reference 5513-17. This was a British military, mil-spec watch. The watches were designed by Rolex, of course, but with the specifications and the regulations as put forth by the Ministry of Defense. That is incredible. That's the epitome of what it means to be a tool watch. This was not, hey, make us a tough watch, and we wanted it to be a Rolex. This was, okay, great Rolex. These are the specifications that we need you to meet so we can create the watch that will serve our divers best. End of story. And that created one of the coolest and most interesting watches of all time. So it's no surprise that Ben is interested in these watches. As someone who appreciates the dive history, he likes them. And the correlation he saw here between this Sea-Dweller and that original, military Submariner is very interesting. First, unlike standard Submariners, it has a fully graduated bezel, from 0 all the way around to 60. So although that might be a small difference that I think many people would actually even overlook, it does matter, because no matter how few people are actually going to use it, that is a tool. It's an instrument of measurement, and frankly, I don't know why after the Ministry of Defense specified that in their watch, why Rolex didn't even adopt that into the sub moving forward. It doesn't really make any sense to me. Further, it's cyclopsless. This Sea-Dweller has no cyclops. To my understanding, it lacks that classic Rolex cyclops because the technology at the time did not allow for the cyclops to withstand the depths the watch could. I believe the cyclops were actually glued, or they were separate pieces in the crystal and they were applied, whereas now with the new Sea-Dwellers they're all in one piece. But separate from the reason, it still creates that very clean, almost milsub-like aesthetic that Ben liked. So I 100% agree with Ben. It's not something that I was thinking about before, but now that I am, I think that you 100% made not only the right decision, but the decision that I hope that I would have made if I was in your position. So big props on the Sea-Dweller. Next is the Cartier Ceinture, a really beautiful watch, and we'll go into why it's important to Ben first, and then why it's important to me. It's important to Ben because it was his grandfather's watch. Not this particular example, but the watch itself, the Cartier Ceinture in white, an automatic in white. It was his grandfather's watch, and he fawned over the watch, and he loved the watch, probably as both a grandson and as a watch fanatic. But when his grandfather passed, I believe a little over a year ago, the watch didn't go to him. Ben has an uncle who he admits, very humbly, who deserved the watch more. He had a closer claim to that watch than Ben did. But instead of sulking about it, Ben went and got one for himself. So from an emotional standpoint, you won. I mean, this watch has personal narrative, and I love that. You will always have those emails that you were sending out to dealers and to whomever. Can you please find this for me? This is my story. This is why I want this, and these are the very specific specifications that I need to be met. So from a personal standpoint, huge props. From a taste standpoint, just as the Sea-Dweller is probably the epitome of a dive watch, or really the dive king, the Ceinture is basically the same thing in the dress world. Just as most vintage Cartier is, I mean, whether that's the Tank Normal or the Louis or so many other, the Bangalore, the Crash, there are so many, but this is no exception. This is a truly refined, spectacular watch. What I love about it in the Cartier context is something that you actually outlined in your email briefly, but you did do it. One of Ben's specifications was that it had to say Paris on the dial and not Switzerland. He explained, his reasoning for this was quite simple. He does not view Cartier as a watchmaker. He views them as, Philly French fashion brand that makes timeless designs, but not a watchmaker. So he believed that brand, is more of a Parisian brand than it is a Swiss brand. Do I agree with Ben? Absolutely. Cartier is French. It's a Parisian brand. It's not a Swiss brand. I care very little for its connection to Swiss watchmaking. I don't think that they are wonderful watchmakers, or their watchmaking supremacy is not even close to their historical supremacy in design. But I wouldn't have given it personally. I have a Cartier Ceinture Automatique. It says Switzerland. It doesn't matter to me at all. It's not a detail that I would be interested in. Whether it says Switzerland or Swiss or Paris in the dial, the reality remains. What Cartier means, what we view it as, and the value it represents remains. And for you, what really made this watch so much, I think, more special was after you got it. I don't believe it was at the time you purchased it, but after you purchased it, Ben referenced one of my videos, one of the Theo and Harris videos, in which I praised Rolex for their release of the Jubilee Bracelet. I think that it's extremely impressive that a brand like Rolex, that's so at the bedrock of the watch world, introduced a new bracelet. It's not something you see very often, and when you do see it, like Jubilee did with the Geophysique, it's not big news and it's not monumental. It doesn't lay at the core of their brand, but the Jubilee bracelet does. So Ben heard that and wanted to know if I agreed with him that the Oyster Flex bracelet was now the new Jubilee, or had the potential to be the new Jubilee. And my answer is yes, I do agree with you. I do think that a really well-made rubber strap, particularly on a Rolex Submariner or Sea-Dweller, makes sense. There's no doubt. These are true tool watches, or at least they should be. Although they're a little bit fancy and ritzy and expensive now, at their core, they are still tool watches. And in the world of being a tool watch, I can't imagine, maybe apart from the NATOs that were used by, that were specified by the Ministry of Defense, I can't imagine a more durable and reliable development. And I really got to give them credit. Rolex, with the Oyster bracelet, has the easiest cop-out and just way out of ever making another bracelet again. They've got the Oyster, they've got the Jubilee, and they've got the presidential bracelet. That's it. They're done. They don't need to make another bracelet. But I've got to just admire the fact that they did. And I'm definitely one of the people that will say that Rolex does rest on their laurels, that Rolex definitely does know that they are the best in the world or the most successful in the world, and really kind of no matter what they do or how hard they try, it's going to remain that way. But this introduction of this new strap, which is only found on the Yachtmaster and on the new Daytonas in precious metals, is wonderful. These straps are not sold separately, but Ben managed to snag one from an authorized dealer, I believe. So Ben now has one of these straps on his Sea-Dweller. So not only props on the watch itself, but your own thought around these Oyster Flex bracelets, and I think your accuracy. You're dead on. This is a win for Rolex. I don't know if it's going to be recognized as such in the mass market, but I sure hope it is. Okay, I think I've gone pretty in depth on the two watches. You've got the ultimate Rolex tool watch, particularly for you, on a strap that you view, and I agree, is a monumental development by Rolex. And you've got one of the finest, most elegant, and just classic watches around from an equally famous brand. Okay, so now on to my recommendation, and I don't have much foundation for this. I don't have much, actual reason to say these two things. It's just my gut. One, Piaget. I think you should really consider Piaget. Your appreciation of the refinement around Cartier demonstrates to me that you'd be open to an ultra slim, very, very serious Swiss manufacturer, probably the Swiss counterpart to Cartier. They're the Swiss version, the Swiss brother. They're extremely well regarded as far as movement and historical supremacy in that. I mean, they're the world record holders for decades, on thinness of manually wound and I think automatic calibers. This is not a joke company, and their designs, particularly with stone dials, really top notch. Second, if you're going to continue in the sports world, I really would love to see a vintage sub or a vintage GMT, the models that predate what you view as the overblown cases. I think that the thinness of like a vintage GMT 1675, for example, would blow you away. Or even a later model, I'm not even sure the reference, but even the later models from the 90s, they're still very thin, and their presence is very much so unlike modern Rolexes. So that's where I think that your interest really could lie ahead. But like I so humbly already admitted, I really don't know. Ben, it's an absolute pleasure looking at your watches. You have my deepest admiration for the amount of thought and time you've put into your collection. Forget the money, the thought and the time alone are so impressive. You are a true watch geek, Ben. Thank you so much for sending in your 2-watch collection. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of Collection Review. Do not forget to check out the watches in the watch shop at theoandharris.com. They're all in front of me because they're absolutely beautiful. That's it, guys. Have an awesome Wednesday.